You close your eyes. 8 hours later, an alarm drags you back, every single day. But for most of human history, nobody slept like that, and the difference might explain why so many of us feel exhausted all the time. Researchers studying hunter-gatherer groups in Tanzania, Namibia, and Bolivia, groups living without electricity, without alarm clocks, without 9 to 5 schedules, found something unexpected. These people sleep, on average, around 6.5 hours a night, less than the 8 hours we're constantly told we need. But here's the twist: they almost never reported sleep problems. No insomnia, no lying awake at 3 in the morning dreading tomorrow. So, what was different? First, their sleep was tied directly to temperature, not to darkness. They typically fell asleep a few hours after sunset as the air cooled down and woke up just before or right around sunrise. The body's internal clock, the circadian rhythm, was locked to the natural rise and fall of heat throughout the day. That rhythm ran deep, and it ran clean. Second, they didn't treat sleep as a single, uninterrupted block. Ancient and medieval records, including manuscripts from physicians and poets writing centuries ago, describe something called biphasic sleep, or two-phase sleep. People would sleep for a few hours, wake up naturally in the middle of the night for an hour or two, and then sleep again until morning. That middle of the night wakefulness wasn't insomnia. It was considered completely normal. People used it to pray, to reflect, to talk quietly, or simply to lie still. Third, and maybe most importantly, they didn't sleep in isolation. Hunter-gatherer bands slept together, not always in the same physical spot, but close. Someone was almost always awake in the group at any given hour, which meant the tribe collectively never fully dropped its guard. Sleep wasn't a vulnerable shutdown. It was woven into the rhythm of the group. The combination of natural light cues, flexible timing, and social sleep created a fundamentally different relationship with rest than what most of us experience today. Sleep wasn't scheduled, it was felt. The first major disruption to human sleep came not from screens or coffee, but from fire, specifically artificial light on demand. For hundreds of thousands of years, fire was the only way to push back the dark. But fire burns out. It requires tending. It naturally wound down, and so did the people around it. Then came oil lamps, then candles, then gaslighting, and finally, in the late 19th century, the electric light bulb. Each step extended the usable hours of the evening. Each step shifted when people felt ready to sleep, later and later into the night. But work and school and civic life still demanded an early start. The gap between when people went to sleep and when they had to wake up quietly compressed. The Industrial Revolution accelerated everything. Before factories, most work followed the rhythm of sunlight and seasons. A farmer's day in December looked nothing like a farmer's day in June. But factory shifts didn't flex with the seasons. The clock became the authority, not the body. For the first time in human history, millions of people were forced to wake at a fixed hour every single day, regardless of whether their bodies were ready. The concept of 8 continuous hours as the gold standard of sleep emerged only in the 20th century, partly from industrial labor negotiations about working hours, not from biology. Before that, the two-phase sleep pattern was so common that waking up in the night wasn't seen as a problem. Once the single-block model became the norm, suddenly that natural middle-of-the-night wakefulness became labeled as a disorder. Weekend lie-ins, that familiar urge to sleep late on Saturday and Sunday, are essentially the body trying to repay a debt accumulated across 5 days of artificial schedules. Scientists call this social jet lag, a chronic misalignment between your biological clock and your social clock. It's not laziness, it's your body remembering what it was built for. Here's what makes this genuinely strange. The human body hasn't changed much since the Paleolithic. The same hormones, the same sleep architecture, the same circadian wiring that guided a hunter-gatherer to sleep under the stars is still running inside you right now. Melatonin rises in the evening as light fades, signaling the brain to prepare for sleep. Cortisol surges before dawn, preparing the body to wake. Body temperature drops in the early hours of the night and rises toward morning. These cycles are ancient. They predate modern humans entirely. They evolved over millions of years in response to a world lit only by the sun. But modern life floods that system with interference. Blue light from phone and laptop screens suppresses melatonin production in the evening. The brain interprets it as midday sunlight. Caffeine blocks adenosine, the chemical that builds sleep pressure across the day. Artificial heating keeps indoor temperatures stable through the night, removing one of the key natural cues the body used to shift between sleep stages. Sleep itself is not a single state. It cycles through light sleep, deep slow wave sleep, and REM, rapid eye movement sleep, across the night in roughly 90-minute rounds. Deep sleep is when the brain physically clears metabolic waste, when growth hormone peaks, when memories consolidate from short-term into long-term storage. REM is when emotional processing happens, when the brain rehearses, integrates, and sometimes solves problems. When sleep is cut short, by an alarm going off mid-cycle, by staying up too late, by fragmented nights, those later stages get compressed first. REM sleep, which dominates the final hours of a full night, is the first casualty. And because REM handles emotional regulation, chronic sleep deprivation doesn't just make you tired, it makes you reactive, anxious, and worse at reading other people's emotions. Our ancestors weren't sleeping perfectly, but they were sleeping in sync with systems built over millions of years. We're running that same hardware on a schedule it was never designed for. None of this means we should abandon modern life and sleep in bands around a dying fire. But understanding where sleep came from does reveal a few things that genuinely help. Light is the most powerful lever you have. Morning sunlight, even 10 minutes outside early in the day, anchors your circadian clock more effectively than any supplement. It tells your body precisely where in the 24-hour cycle it sits, and it times your melatonin release for that evening. Evening light, especially from screens, does the opposite. Temperature still works the way it always did. A slightly cooler room in the second half of the night mirrors the natural pre-dawn temperature drop your ancestors experienced. The body's core temperature needs to fall to enter deep sleep. Removing heavy blankets or lowering the thermostat slightly can help that transition happen the way biology intended. The middle of the night waking, that frustrates so many people, may not need fixing. If you wake at 2 or 3 in the morning and can't immediately return to sleep, the worst thing you can do is lie there, calculating how many hours you have left. That anxiety is modern. The waking itself may simply be a leftover feature of biphasic sleep, a system that worked for an extremely long time. And perhaps most importantly, sleep wasn't something our ancestors optimized. It wasn't a performance metric, it was simply part of being alive, as natural as hunger. The pressure to sleep perfectly, to track every cycle and stage, can itself become a source of disruption. There is even a term for it now: orthosomnia, anxiety caused by obsessing over sleep data. We evolved to sleep flexibly, socially, and in tune with light and temperature. The further modern life drifts from those conditions, the harder the body has to fight against its own ancient programming. That fight is quiet, and it costs more than most people realize. If this made you think differently about rest, consider subscribing. There's a lot more on how ancient human biology quietly shapes modern life. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you wake up in the night? Now you know why.